Our clothes, as a mirror, reflect the history of civilization. It is more than second layer, as nowadays fashion and style became the way of self-expression, seeing deep symbolism in surrounding material things. Speaking via things and rituals is absolutely in Kazakh style. That is why the history of national costume is an incredible world exposing our mentality.
May this year, eyes of millions of people were on TV screens, watching the wedding ceremony of the sixth successor of the British throne, Prince Harry and American actress Meghan Markle. Part of the audience simply enjoyed the ceremony. Others were interested in the details of the royal wedding, makeup, dress, and of course the jewelry of the bride, and most of all her tiara. New Duchess of Sussex gave preference to the diamond rim of Mary of Teck, grandmother of the reigning Queen Elizabeth II. The beauty of this jewelry is undeniable, but it is by no means exclusive. Archaeological finds in the Great Steppe demonstrate that our ancestors have something to counter the British crown. In today's program, we will talk about jewelry, materials, and unique technologies. An ancient burial was discovered in 1939 in Zayeliski, Alatau, the Kargalen Gorge at that altitude of more than 2,000 meters above sea level. Among 300 various finds, archaeologists pay special attention to the golden diadem. It is a long golden strip consisting of two lateral fragments. The central part is absent. Images of animals, both existing and mystical, as well as humans and birds surrounded by complex vegetative ornamentation, could be seen in the inner part of the plate. It is also called the Scythian animal style. I am struck by unequaled level of design thought, namely jewelry design and the abstract thinking of the masters of the Saka period, even ancient masters of the 1st and 2nd millennium BC.
Именно ювелирный дизайн. Как можно было и абстрактность мышления мастеров сакского периода, то есть очень древний тоже это первое-второе тысячелетие до нашей эры, то есть до рождения Христа. Как можно было?
How wonderfully they could stylize an animal.
И мы узнаем.
We learn that this is a tiger, that is a lion, a deer. What is stylization? Do you see convention and how this convention fits perfectly into the art line?
И как эта условность прекрасно вписывается в художественную линию.
Later, scientists found out that to create a jewelry masterpiece, ancient masters used pressing techniques, which was deformation of the material, change of its shape and size. This method is now widely used in auto and car building, in the manufacture of parts for machines or devices, as well as dentistry. Can you imagine that a similar technique of pressing using more primitive tools was available to our ancestors centuries ago? Add to that filigree work of jewelers who encrusted the trunks of animals with turquoise. Eyes of these mysterious creatures were made of carnelian and almandine.
Какая тонкая работа с драгоценными камнями.
What a delicate work with precious stones. This is called high taste, a combination of rubies and emeralds, and they are in the right place. Everything is very well adjusted.
Не могут не находиться.
This indicates the very subtle taste of our ancestors.
В очень тонком вкусе наших предков.
The famous archaeologist Alexander Bernstam was one of the first to explore the Kargalian diadem, belonging to the late Usan period, and he suggested that the jewelry belonged to a shaman woman and was part of her ritual headdress. Today, not only monarchs or wizards can wear this elegant accessory. Most women tried on a diadem at least once in their life, for a graduation party, a wedding, or a social event. Fortunately, the assortment and price point is almost limitless. Experts believe that one of the places of metallurgy origin is located on the territory of the Great Steppe, between Ural and Altai. This process consists of several stages: ore mining, smelting, mechanical and chemical processing of materials. Most probably, after having learned to manufacture metal weapons or equipment, our ancestors learned to make jewelry. Not only just learned, but also mastered this skill at highest level. That is a clear differentiation between iron, bronze, gold, and silver. No one makes a stirrup out of silver. No one ever found a silver stirrup or a bit, or a golden spear tip. This indicates that our ancestors had subtle knowledge of the metal and ore properties. They knew that non-ferrous metals, such as silver and gold, should be produced from one ores, and ferrous metals, such as iron, tin, lead, should be produced from other ones. According to experts, the statement about the high quality of works performed by the masters of the Great Steppe is relevant not only for metallurgical industry, but also for textiles manufacturing. Recent discoveries in the territory of the Pavlodar region can be a good example of this. Archaeologists study fragments of fabric related to the Kimak, Kipchak, and Golden Horde times, which is approximately the period from the 9th to the 14th centuries.
Большая часть,
99.9% of the material saved were skills, which is connected with the durability of the fabrics. Among preserved materials are pieces of clothing and some individual elements such as collars, seams. Everything is of highest quality and luxurious. The materials I process is elite textile, and the level is certainly very high.
И уровень, безусловно, очень высокий.
The headdress, commonly called boka because of its belonging to the Golden Horde times, was also found here. However, any modern Kazakh will recognize a familiar silhouette in boka.
На самом деле, таких головных уборов...
In fact, there are a lot of such headdresses from the ancient times, but visually it is a cap with a birch, bark frame, adjoining in the form of a tube. It has one-to-one resemblance to a modern Kazakh saukele.
Современной казахской саукеле.
If we take regional variants of this headgear in Kazakhstan, then the modern Kazakh ethnography is very similar. This indicates continuity, cultural continuity in particular. Such headgear with sacred meaning never appears and disappears just like that.
Просто так в воздухе не возникает и просто так никогда не уходит, потому что
I want to tell you that in ethnography, funeral and wedding rite are the most conservative ones. Saukele is part of a wedding rite of the Kazakhs. It exists since the time immemorial and remains unchanged.
существует фактически в неизменном виде.
In the previous programs, we have already touched upon the sacral and utilitarian values of saukele. Let us go back to excavations in Pavlodar region. One of the main observations of experts is that our ancestors had sophisticated taste and wore clothes from unique fabrics.
Кто носил? Я думаю, знаю.
Who wore the headgear? I think first of all noblemen. There is one fragment of brocade I researched. At first, I thought it was just red silk.
Просто красный шелк. Когда
When I put it under the microscope and enhanced, I found traces of gold threads. It was very thin Chinese brocade. Imagine, some fabrics, threads are the third-fourth part of a millimeter in thickness. Imagine what a skill. This Chinese gold thread that I'm talking about is as thick as metal. I have encountered a lot of such threads from the monument in Ukraine. I studied them enough. There is data from scanning electron microscopy, where you can clearly see that the fabrics are 0.5 to 0.6 microns, thousandth of a millimeter. Can you imagine that this is a technology of the 13th to 14th centuries?
миллиметра. А это все
That was to say nanotechnology of that ancient time.
технологии того времени, по сути.
It should be noted that in any culture, be it European or Asian, silk is a kind of identifier of a high standard of living. Consequently, we can draw a conclusion about the prosperity of the population.
Да, это костюм знати, да, это...
Yes, that is an expensive costume of a nobleman. Population which is buried here certainly was prosperous. However, not all of the population. Social stratification still existed.
Безусловно. Вот социальное расслоение существовало.
The opportunity to buy such clothes say that the population worked hard, participated in the international exchange, that it was active and did not live in its closed world as was engaged in primitive things.
В своем мире. И думала, так сказать, ну вот...
The civilization was very developed and could afford such expensive fabrics.
Таким, скажем, примитивным. Нет, это очень развитая цивилизация могла себе позволить.
The question is, how did these amazing fabrics appear in the territory of our homeland? Were they gifted or brought by caravans along the Great Silk Road? Perhaps the expensive manufactory was handed over to the owners by inheritance. Experts have yet to answer these questions. One cannot, however, exclude the option that the fabric was made here in the ancient city of Kazakhstan.
Сегодня Тарас – это город, утопающий в тутовнике.
Today, Taraz is a city drowning in mulberry trees. The claim that there were Chinese trading factories in Taraz is not mine.
Не мои выводы, это выводы моих коллег.
It is a conclusion of my colleagues from Kazakhstan and other countries. Assuming that having a fertile climate, the technology and capabilities, people did not produce silk using Chinese technology is very wrong.
Технологии. Но, простите, это неправильно.
The same applies to fine wool. According to one of the existing versions of historians, fine fleece sheep could first appear on the territory of Kazakhstan in the Bronze Age.
Поэтому, если вот те ткани, которые...
I consider the fabrics that I have to be fine wooled. They could have been produced here, because it is ridiculous to imagine that a population that lives off the livestock, that can cut wool and can get a full use out of sheep without production waste, suddenly would not learn to spin. It would be strange.
Производство вдруг бы не научилось бы прясть. Ну, это же смешно.
It is worth noting that ethnographic machines found on the territory of the Great Steppe look more primitive than the Chinese or European ones. However, we are talking about very different materials.
И те же китайские станки, на
The
которых...
Chinese machines brocade was made on did not look that much modern than the ones found on the territory of the Great Steppe.
Потому что, ну,
Yes, they are more constructively different because the technical thinking of China was very strongly developed. Ours are simpler, but our fabrics were also simpler. If the Chinese brocade had on basic thread and double filling thread, then our fabrics had simple interweaving. But they were of high quality.
или хлопок.
Note that the presence of gold threads in the fabric adds several $1,000s to the cost of modern dresses and automatically makes it haute couture masterpiece. At the Fashion Week in Paris in 2010, famous designer Zouhair Murad presented evening dresses embroidered with gold threads and pearls. Fashionistas have probably already figured out how much this outfit could cost today. Our great-great-grandmothers flaunted in such dresses back in the Middle Ages. Another interesting archaeological find relates to Pazire culture, to the era of early iron. In 1993, in one of the so-called frozen graves, scientists discovered the remains of a young woman, who was later nicknamed the Princess of Ukok. 6 of the horses buried with her testified to the high status of the buried woman. The appearance of the princess, tattooed hands, high complex hairstyle surprised archaeologists. She was dressed in a white silk shirt, a burgundy woolen skirt, felt socks, and a fur coat. Imagine the Altai princess had been laying in a burial place for more than 2,500 years.
Я думаю, что
I think that skirt, Bildimshi, appeared before all the garments, earlier than sweaters, bras, tank tops, etc.
одежда раньше, чем кофтан, раньше, чем бюстгальтер, например. Раньше, чем майка, не, но это действительно так, потому что...
However, maybe it appeared later than a cloak because the ancient man first had to cover himself with an animal skin, throw it over his shoulders.
Сначала нужно было накрыться шкурой, как бы.
He cared little about covering his lower body. Then people began to wrap the torso, body parts they sit on the stones. Obviously, there were no chairs or benches. It was a luck if ancient people could sit on a fallen tree, not as cold as sitting on a rock.
даже. Вот хорошо, если на поваленное бревно сел, как бы на поваленное дерево сидел.
However, most of the time people use cold rocks as a seat. Therefore, they put animal skin to make it warmer and to avoid losing the skin. Tied it to their body, fixed it on the torso, on the hips, and voila, we have a skirt.
Как бы как-то привязать на поясе, закрепить на торсе. Вот вам уже и юбка как.
Nevertheless, if today Princess Ukok appears on the streets of a large megapolis in her clothes, her outfit is unlikely to shock or confuse anyone. With the exception, perhaps, of the hairstyle reaching 90 centimeters in height and made of wool, felt, and her own hair. By the way, at the January Fashion Week in Paris, the models of Jean-Paul Gaultier defiled with unusual hairstyles, and if you think that this is the know-how of modern hairstyles, then, as it turned out, you are mistaken. As they say, everything new is well forgotten old.
Потому что с точки зрения дизайна, я могу сказать,
In terms of design, I can say that the circle is closed.
замкнулся. Вот современный дизайн,
Modern designs, after all the complications, after Rococo, curlicues, ruffles, after the waves of fashion, which are complicated, superfluous, intended to show luxury, returns to laconism and expressiveness.
как бы на усложнение, на излишество, показать вот эту роскошь, возвращается к лаконичности. Вот.
And here, naturally, modern design, modern style fits very well and harmonizes with the style of antiquity, the style of our ancestors.
Он очень хорошо укладывается и гармонируется в стилистику древности, в стилистику наших предков. Конечно, но другие материалы.
Of course, the materials are different. Meaning is different, but the perfection of the lines, the design, from the artistic point of view, is where the amazing interlacing happens.
С точки зрения художественной, это, конечно, совершенство линий. Вот это, вот здесь происходит такая удивительная смычка. Мы переживаем сейчас.
We are now experiencing a fascinating period when the time ring of art, of design is closed.
Времени дизайна, оно как бы замкнулось.
The question is, when did attention of glossy editions and fashion podiums switch from classic European outfits toward the authentic Eastern ones? Social anthropologist Euphrates Imambiek shared his memories in this regard.
На одном из показов в Париже
At one of the shows in Paris, Naomi Campbell defiled in a Moroccan jewelry, and it was a sensation.
в марокканских. Это, конечно, была сенсация. Вот тогда, наверное,
It is then our domestic designers began to exploit, to introduce motifs of petroglyphs through the media.
как бы внедрять мотивы петроглифов.
Petroglyphs are also interesting from an aesthetic point of view. Very concise and very capacious outlines, silhouettes.
Ёмкие абрисы, такие силуэты.
Over time, domestic designers began to expand the range of materials used in the work. To replace petroglyphs and national ornaments, embroidered with simple textiles, more complicated plots, sketches, and even fabrics were introduced.
Теперь очень активно это
Now the traditional materials, such as koshma and felt, are actively used.
традиционные материалы, кошму, то есть войлок. И войлок
Felting became a trend. It is very popular among our foreign guests from Europe and Western countries.
Нашими зарубежными гостями, причем из Европы, западными гостями. Очень
Foreigners like to buy coats, hats, and dresses.
как бы и головные уборы, и платья. Есть, я уже встречал.
I have already met ladies wearing dresses with elements of Kazakh style at receptions and social occasions, and the ladies look great in them.
Что, конечно, очень украшает и как бы выгодно подчеркивает наших дам.
Oriental Vintage Program series allows us to take different looks at the cultural heritage of our ancestors. They were often the first in history to produce amazing garments and accessories from different materials, fabrics, leather, wool, metal, without modern equipment. They had a sophisticated taste and managed to laconically but very clearly reflect their everyday life in items. They were representatives of advanced and progressive civilizations. They were able to tame the great steppe.